If you're over 50 and you're still doing this, you are actively damaging the rest of your financial life. Not slowly, not accidentally, actively. And the worst part is, you think you're being careful. You think you're being responsible. You think you're being conservative. You're not. You're hiding. And at your age, hiding is expensive. Let me be very clear with you right at the start. This has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with education, nothing to do with how hard you worked. This is about a habit you refused to stop, a habit that felt reasonable at 40, comforting at 45, and is now quietly destroying your remaining runway. If you're over 50, time is no longer forgiving. It doesn't smooth out mistakes anymore. It doesn't give you second chances. It doesn't average things out. It locks them in. And right now, you are locking in losses. You won't see them on a statement. You won't feel them this month. You won't notice them this year. That's why this mistake is so dangerous. You believe staying conservative is safe. You believe holding cash is protection. You believe avoiding risk is maturity. That belief is wrong, and it's costing you more every single day. Inflation doesn't care how cautious you are. It doesn't pause because you're nervous. It doesn't slow down because you're tired. It doesn't ask permission. It just takes, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. Think of inflation like a tax you never voted for, a tax that increases automatically, a tax that applies whether you act or not. When your money sits still, inflation is not sitting still. It's moving against you. Every year you leave cash idle, your purchasing power shrinks. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough that you don't react, and that's the trap. After 50, cash is no longer neutral. It's a guaranteed loss. Guaranteed. You may not see the number go down, but what that money can actually do for you is collapsing. And you're telling yourself that's fine because at least it feels safe. Let me strip this down to something simple. Money either compounds or it decays. There is no third option. Money sitting still is not waiting, it's falling behind. Opportunity cost is not theoretical. It's not an academic term. It's the difference between what your money could have earned and what it earned instead, which in your case is almost nothing. And when time is short, even small differences become fatal. A few percent doesn't sound scary when you're 30. At 50, a few percent is the line between control and dependence. You don't have decades anymore, you have cycles. And every bad cycle now does permanent damage. That's what no one tells you. When you're younger, mistakes wash out. When you're older, they harden. They become your baseline. You don't feel the loss immediately because pain is delayed. That delay is what keeps you comfortable. But comfort is not safety. Comfort is sedation. And right now, you are sedating yourself while inflation and missed compounding do the real work. You're telling yourself you'll act later, after clarity, after certainty, after the next signal. That's not strategy, that's avoidance. And avoidance has a cost. You are not unlucky. You are not a victim of the system. You are not trapped. You are choosing familiarity over discipline. You are choosing emotional comfort over financial control. And you're doing it every single day. You let this continue. Here's the part most people refuse to face. Inaction is not neutral. Inaction is a decision, and the damage accelerates. After 50, it's usually the worst one, because while you're waiting, the math keeps running. Inflation keeps compounding. Opportunity cost keeps compounding. Lost time keeps compounding against you. You don't need a crash for this to hurt you. You don't need a recession. You don't need a disaster. All you need is exactly what's happening right now. Time passing, money sitting. You doing nothing. That's enough. And the longer you keep doing this, the faster. The damage didn't start today. That's the part you need to sit with. It started years ago, quietly, patiently, and it never stopped. Time does not negotiate. It doesn't slow down because you finally noticed. It doesn't care that you meant to act sooner. It just keeps moving forward. And if you're over 50, time is no longer flexible. Every year now matters more than the last. Let me say something uncomfortable. If you had acted earlier, even slightly earlier, this conversation would sound very different. Not emotionally, mathematically. The same decision made at 40 has a completely different outcome than the same decision made at 50. And by 60, it's not even the same game. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't regret for the sake of emotion. This is consequence. Compound interest is ruthless about timing. It rewards early action and punishes delay without mercy. When you were younger, time did most of the work. Now time is working against you. You no longer control compounding, you're racing it. And every year you hesitate, you're not just missing gains, you're shrinking what's even possible. Delay is not neutral. Say that again, slowly. Delay is not neutral. Delay is an active financial decision. And after 50, it's usually the most expensive one. You tell yourself you're reducing risk. You're not. You're increasing certainty of loss. Because while you wait, inflation compounds. While you wait, opportunity cost compounds. While you wait, the number of remaining productive years keeps getting smaller. This isn't about market timing. This is about life timing. Markets recover. They always have. Time doesn't. When a market drops, it can bounce back. When a year passes, it's gone forever. And mistakes after 50 don't get erased. They don't average out. They harden into reality. This is where regret actually comes from. Not from bad decisions, from late decisions. Picture yourself 10, 15 years from now. Not broke. That's too dramatic. Constrained. That's worse. You still have money, but not enough flexibility. You still have options, but not good ones. You still depend on systems you don't control. Inflation, policy, markets, other people's decisions. That future version of you isn't angry. They're tired. They look back and realize the warning signs were obvious. They just felt inconvenient. And that's how regret is born. Not from ignorance, from delay. You'll tell yourself you were being careful. But careful doesn't matter when the math doesn't work. Every year of hesitation doesn't reduce risk. It multiplies loss. Because the cost of delay compounds too. Missed growth compounds. Lost purchasing power compounds. Shrinking time compounds. All at once. And you feel none of it today. That's why people stay stuck. Pain is deferred, damage is invisible, comfort is immediate, you're waiting for clarity, that's what you say. But clarity is a luxury of people who still have time. At this stage, clarity is often just an excuse to avoid responsibility, because acting now forces you to confront reality. Waiting lets you pretend nothing has changed, but everything has. Your risk profile changed, your timeline changed, your margin for error collapsed. Inflation didn't slow down for you. Compound interest didn't pause. The clock didn't reset. You just didn't notice how fast it was moving. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. Doing nothing feels calm, but it creates panic later. Acting feels uncomfortable now, but it buys control later. That trade-off doesn't get easier with age. It gets sharper. You are late. That's the truth. But you are not finished yet. What you do next decides which direction this goes. Whether this becomes quiet regret or disciplined control. You already feel late. Good. Because now there's nowhere left to hide. Up to this point, you could still tell yourself stories. You could say it's complicated. You could say it depends. You could say you're being cautious. That ends here. Because when you strip everything down, this problem is painfully simple. One decision, repeated, every year. That's it. Not dozens of decisions, not daily trading, not clever timing. One decision you keep making again and again. What do you do with your money while time is moving forward? Do you let it work or do you let it sit? Cash flow versus idle cash. That's the whole game. And most people over 50 are losing it quietly. You've been taught to fear risk. So you avoided it. You told yourself that avoiding risk was the responsible move. That's backwards. At this stage, avoiding intelligent risk guarantees loss. Guaranteed. Because the real risk now is erosion. Inflation eroding purchasing power. Time eroding opportunity. Inaction eroding control. Let's walk through the chain. Slowly, you avoid investing because it feels uncertain. That choice has an immediate effect. Your money doesn't grow while inflation keeps moving, so purchasing power shrinks. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but consistently. That shrinking purchasing power creates the next effect. Your future income potential drops. Because income in later life comes from capital, not from effort. Less capital growth means less future cash flow. And when future cash flow shrinks, dependence increases. Dependence on pensions, dependence on policies, dependence on market conditions you can't influence. That's the chain. Avoid investing, lose purchasing power, shrink future income, increase dependence. It doesn't break, it doesn't pause, it doesn't care how calm you feel today. Now let me say this clearly. Inaction is not neutral. Not choosing is choosing decay. Every year you don't decide, you are deciding against yourself. The illusion of stability is the most dangerous part. You look at your account balance and it hasn't gone down, so you relax. But stability on paper is instability in reality, because the world around that money is getting more expensive. Food, healthcare, energy, housing. Your money isn't standing still, it's falling behind. And here's where people finally understand. Let's use simple numbers, nothing fancy. Say you have $100,000. You leave it mostly idle, maybe earning a little, but not enough to beat inflation. Let's say inflation averages just 3%. That sounds harmless. After 10 years, your money hasn't collapsed, but what it can buy has dropped sharply. Now compare that to a modest difference. Not aggressive, not speculative, just a few extra percentage points working for you instead of against you. That small annual difference doesn't feel exciting, but over 10, 15 years, the gap doesn't grow loudly, it explodes quietly. You don't notice it year to year. You notice it when it's too late to fix. This is where people get angry, not at the market, at themselves, because the math was simple. The warning signs were obvious. They just didn't act. You thought you were being responsible. You thought you were protecting yourself. What you were actually doing was being passive, and passivity is expensive when time is short. Let me be calm about this. You don't need excitement. You don't need hot tips. You don't need television shouting at you about the next big thing. That noise distracts people. The real damage happens in silence, in years where nothing happens, in years where you do nothing and call it safety. That's why this is so dangerous, because it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels reasonable, and reasonable decisions made too late still fail. There's a reason disciplined investors sound boring, because discipline isn't emotional, it's repetitive. It's doing the same intelligent thing even when it's uncomfortable. Most people don't fail because they took one bad risk. They fail because they avoided all meaningful ones. They let time decide for them, and time is brutal to people who don't act. You don't need to like this reality, but you do need to face it, because there is only one way this stops getting worse, only one, and it requires a break, a behavioral break. Not more waiting, not more observing, not more hoping clarity appears. Something has to change. And if it doesn't, the math will finish the job for you. Fear is high now. Good, because confusion is gone. You don't need more information. You don't need another explanation. You don't need one more article or one more video or one more opinion. You need a behavioral break right now. This starts by killing one belief. Cash is not safety. It hasn't been for a long time. Cash feels calm because it doesn't move, but what doesn't move gets eaten. Silently, relentlessly. From this point forward, you stop treating cash like protection and start treating capital like a tool. Tools are meant to be used. Capital that isn't allocated is wasted potential. That doesn't mean chaos. That doesn't mean gambling. That doesn't mean chasing noise. It means discipline. Discipline over comfort. Comfort tells you to wait. Discipline tells you to act with rules. And rules are what you need now. Not more decisions, fewer decisions, stricter rules. Because decision fatigue is how people stay stuck. Long-term wealth is not built by emotion. It's built by allocation, by deciding in advance where money goes, why it goes there, and under what conditions it moves. That's not exciting. It's effective. Investing at this stage is not about excitement. It's controlled exposure. Exposure to growth, exposure to productive assets, exposure to compounding instead of erosion. Avoiding all risk is not conservative anymore. It's reckless, because the only thing you're guaranteed by doing nothing is decline. There are two paths from here, only two. Path one is familiar. You stay passive. You tell yourself you'll revisit this later. You keep more cash than you should. You avoid discomfort. Nothing dramatic happens. Your options slowly shrink. Your flexibility tightens. Your dependence increases. You don't collapse. You just slowly lose control. That's path one. Path two is disciplined. You accept that comfort is expensive. You accept that controlled action is less painful than slow decay. You allocate capital with intent. You respect risk instead of hiding from it. You let compounding work while time still can. You don't need perfect decisions. You need consistent ones. This path doesn't promise riches. It promises something far more important: independence. Not absolute freedom, not luxury. Control. Control over your choices. Control over your future cash flow. control over how much inflation gets to steal from you. That's what financially disciplined adults do. They don't chase, they don't panic, they don't freeze, they structure, they simplify. They act before hesitation turns into regret. You don't need excitement, you need structure. Structure removes emotion. Structure removes procrastination. Structure removes the illusion that waiting is safer. You are not too old, but you are out of excuses. Every excuse now has a price tag, and you already know what happens if you keep paying it. If you want calm, disciplined thinking like this, subscribe. If this hit uncomfortably close, say it in the comments. And if you understand what's actually at stake here, like the video. Ignoring this doesn't make it go away. It only makes it permanent.